Hi, I'm Emily Parker, and last Tuesday, I found my entire life packed into boxes sitting on my front porch. It's only temporary, my mother-in-law, Margaret, had said, her tone dripping with condescension. Sarah needs a proper home for the baby. But I knew better. This was no temporary arrangement. The boxes were stacked neatly, each one labeled with Margaret's meticulous handwriting. Kitchen, clothes, personal items. 5 years of memories reduced to categories and set outside like yesterday's trash. My hand trembled as I reached for my favorite coffee mug, poorly wrapped in crumpled newspaper. "Emily, don't make this harder than it has to be," Margaret said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Her arms were crossed, her expression firm. Behind her stood Sarah, my sister-in-law, with one hand resting on her barely there baby bump and the other tucked protectively over her chest. Her wide, innocent eyes held the practiced look of someone who always got her way. "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking but steady enough. "Daniel and I bought it together. We built this life together." Memories of painting walls, assembling furniture, and dreaming about our future flooded my mind. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin, tight smile. "Sarah's pregnancy is high risk," she explained as if I hadn't already heard it 100 times. "She needs to be near family, and this house is ideal for her. Single story, spacious, close to the hospital. You and Daniel can manage in the rental property for a little while." "The rental property?" I asked, my voice rising. "You mean that dilapidated duplex across town?" Margaret had spent years lamenting how much of a money pit it was. "It's been fixed up," Sarah chimed in, her voice sticky sweet. "Mom's had contractors there all week. It's cozy." Cozy. The word hit like a slap. I could barely contain my disbelief. 3 months ago, when Sarah had announced her pregnancy at a family dinner, Margaret's eyes lit up like it was the second coming. Since then, she used every excuse to center the world around Sarah and her unborn child. "Where's Daniel?" I demanded, peering past them into the house. My house, where movers bustled about, carrying in Sarah's furniture. Through the open door, I saw the coral nursery set she'd been gushing over just last week being hauled upstairs. "He's at work," Margaret replied smoothly, not meeting my eyes. "He agrees this is for the best. Sarah's condition." "Stop," I cut in, my patience wearing thin. "Sarah's condition is a normal pregnancy. I'm a labor and delivery nurse, Margaret. I know what high risk looks like." Sarah's face clouded briefly before she burst into tears, right on cue. Margaret immediately wrapped her arms around her. "Emily," she hissed. "Do you see what you've done? The doctor said she can't handle stress like this." I pulled out my phone, dialing Daniel's number. Straight to voicemail. Twice. 3 times. Margaret crossed her arms again, her smile growing smug. "He's in meetings all day," she said. "Emily, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's only for a few months." But I wasn't naive. This wasn't temporary. The way Sarah was directing the movers, the pristine designer nursery being assembled upstairs, it was all too deliberate. This had been planned, likely for weeks, while I worked back-to-back hospital shifts. "I'll call a lawyer," I said, the words spilling out before I could think twice. Margaret's laugh was sharp and cold. "And who will you hire? Stanley Adams? The Parker family lawyer for 30 years? Or someone else in town who knows better than to cross us?" She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a hiss. "You're out of your league, Emily. Accept this gracefully or make it worse for yourself." My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom explained everything. It's best for the baby. The duplex is fine for now. Please don't make this difficult." For now, the words blurred as tears filled my eyes. 5 years of love, sacrifice, and loyalty reduced to a text message and a pile of boxes. "The movers will take your things to the duplex," Margaret said, already turning back toward the house. "The keys and address are on that box. We need you out by tonight. Sarah needs her rest." I stood frozen as they disappeared inside, Margaret's voice blending with Sarah's as they discussed furniture arrangements. Through the window, I saw Sarah running her fingers along the kitchen counters Daniel and I had scrimped and saved to install. For a moment, the weight of it all threatened to crush me. But as I loaded the first box into my car, my wedding ring caught the light, and something inside me shifted. Margaret thought she'd won, but she underestimated me. I wasn't the same timid girl who married into the Parker family 5 years ago. I had my own resources, my own plans, and nothing left to lose. I glanced back at the house, now alive with workers transforming it into Sarah's new sanctuary. Game on, I whispered under my breath, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The duplex was just as I expected, cramped, dingy, and reeking of mildew. Margaret's so-called fixes consisted of a slapdash paint job and mismatched furniture that looked like it had been scavenged from a garage sale. The wallpaper in the bedroom was peeling, revealing water stains underneath. I sank onto the lumpy couch, scrolling through my phone's photo gallery. Each picture felt like a gut punch. 5 years of memories in that house, now overshadowed by the image of Sarah, undoubtedly repainting my kitchen in the sage green she wouldn't stop talking about. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. "Emily, it's Helen from next door." I opened the door to see my colleague from a hospital. Her brow furrowed, concern etched across her face. "I saw you moving in," she said. "Isn't this the Parkers' infamous rental property?" I nodded, inviting her in. Before I could stop myself, the whole story spilled out. Between sobs, I recounted everything. The packed boxes, the eviction, the smug smiles. Helen's expression darkened as she listened. "Emily," she said carefully, "there's something you should know. Sarah was at the hospital yesterday for her checkup. I wasn't supposed to be near the records desk, but I overheard her talking to Dr. Martinez. She's not high risk at all. In fact, the doctor said she's having one of the easiest pregnancies she's seen in years." I froze, my hands clenching into fists. I knew it, but Daniel won't listen. He's completely under their control. Helen hesitated. "There's more. Last week, I overheard Sarah asking about property laws. Specifically, about how long someone needs to live in a house to establish it as their primary residence." The pieces snapped together like a cruel puzzle. This wasn't temporary. Margaret and Sarah weren't just trying to push me out. They were plotting to take my home. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a group text from Margaret. "Dinner at our house tonight. Mandatory family meeting to discuss the new living arrangements. Emily, please dress appropriately this time." I considered skipping it, but then I remembered the folder hidden in my office desk. The one Margaret and Sarah didn't find when they packed up my life. "I'll be there," I texted back. That evening, I arrived at the Parker mansion wearing my sharpest black dress and a cold, unyielding smile. Through the window, I saw Sarah curled up in my favorite armchair, the one I brought from my parents' house. Now it sat smugly in Margaret's pristine living room. "Emily, so good of you to join us," Margaret said as she opened the door, her eyes narrowing at my outfit. Inside, Daniel sat stiffly beside Sarah, who was dramatically cradling her barely visible bump. "The duplex is cozy," I said lightly, echoing Sarah's earlier jab. "Though I did have an interesting chat with a housing inspector today." Margaret stiffened. "Housing inspector?" "Yes," I replied, letting the moment stretch. "They're very concerned about the black mold behind the bathroom walls. And the electrical issues. Did you know it's illegal to rent out a property in that condition?" Margaret's composure faltered, her smile freezing in place. "You called the housing authorities?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Actually, they called me. Turns out someone filed a complaint months ago, but it was misplaced. Until today, I pulled out my phone, displaying the email. They'll be conducting a full inspection next week." Sarah shot to her feet, her polished mask slipping. "Mom, you promised that place was fixed. I can't have my sister-in-law living in a moldy duplex. Think of how it would look to my blog followers." Ah, her blog. Sarah's carefully curated online image, the one thing she truly cared about. "Oh, don't worry," I said sweetly. "I've already shared my situation on several local community forums. The response has been overwhelming. People are so concerned about a pregnant woman forcing her brother's wife into hazardous housing." Sarah's jaw dropped and she grabbed her phone, frantically checking her follower count. "Take it down," Margaret barked. "This is a private family matter." "Like how you privately packed up my house?" I shot back. "Or how you privately told the neighbors I abandoned my home out of jealousy." I stood, my voice cold and steady. "By the way, I found my folder. The one from my office desk." Daniel's head snapped up. "What folder?" "The one with the property deed," I said, locking eyes with him. "The one that shows I'm the primary owner of the house." My inheritance paid for 70% of the down payment. Legally, the house is mine. The room fell silent. Margaret's face turned a mottled shade of purple, and Sarah's phone slipped from her hand. That's not possible, Margaret stammered. Daniel told us he paid for everything. Did he? I turned to my husband, my voice sharp as a knife. Tell them, Daniel. Tell them how my grandmother's money made this possible. Tell them how you promised it would always be our home. Daniel's face crumbled, his guilt written plainly across it. I didn't think. No, you didn't think. None of you did. I placed a stack of papers on the table. My lawyer, not Stanley Adams, but someone from the city, will be serving you with official papers tomorrow. I want my house back within 48 hours, or we can let a judge decide. I turned to Sarah, whose carefully constructed facade had shattered completely. And Sarah? My lawyer is very interested in your searches about residency laws. Attempted property fraud carries significant consequences. I smoothed my dress, the picture of calm. I'll see myself out. Oh, and Margaret. The housing inspector wants to speak to you about the rent you've been collecting on that duplex. Apparently, you haven't reported that income for years. As I walked to my car, the voices behind me erupted into chaos. Sarah's shrieks, Margaret's frantic demands, and Daniel's desperate attempts to explain. But I didn't look back. They thought they could erase me, replace me, cast me aside. They were wrong. The next 48 hours were a war of attrition. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages. Margaret sent threats wrapped in false politeness. Sarah tried her hand at tearful guilt trips, and Daniel alternated between desperate apologies and weak defenses. I ignored them all, forwarding every message to my lawyer. But on Wednesday morning, there was a knock at my door. Emily, can we talk? It was Robert, my father-in-law, looking older and more exhausted than I had ever seen. I hesitated before letting him in. Unlike Margaret, Robert had always treated me kindly, though his silence in the face of her schemes had been just as hurtful. I found these, he said, placing a folder on my coffee table. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were emails between Margaret and Sarah, dating back months. They outlined everything: the manipulation of Daniel through Sarah's pregnancy, their research into property laws, and their plan to renovate my house while I was too busy working hospital shifts to notice. I stared at the damning evidence, my voice quiet. Why are you showing me this now? Robert sighed, the weight of years of inaction pressing down on him. Because I've seen this before. Margaret did something similar to Daniel's first girlfriend in college. She decided the girl wasn't good enough and pushed her out. The poor thing transferred schools, and Daniel, he didn't stand up for her. I kept quiet then, told myself it wasn't my place. But watching them do this to you, knowing how much you've given to this family, I can't stay silent anymore. I studied the emails, my lawyer's words ringing in my ears. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case. There's more, Robert said hesitantly. The housing inspector called Margaret this morning. The duplex is in worse shape than anyone realized: structural issues, severe code violations. She's been collecting rent illegally for years. Before I could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Helen, looking worried. Emily, you need to see this, she said, holding up her phone. On the screen was Sarah's latest Instagram post, a tearful video ranting about toxic family members and the stress they were putting on her and her unborn child. The comments were brutal. Locals who knew the truth were calling her out, and it was clear her carefully curated image was cracking under the pressure. My phone buzzed again. It was my lawyer. Emily, they're ready to negotiate. All of them. An hour later, I sat in my lawyer's office, facing the people who had tried to erase me from my own life. Margaret's flawless composure was gone. Her shoulders slumped. Sarah's mascara was streaked down her face, and Daniel looked utterly defeated. Here are our terms, my lawyer began, his tone firm and unyielding. Emily gets the house back immediately, and all renovation costs will be reimbursed. Mrs. Parker will face the legal consequences of operating an illegal rental property. And we have ample evidence of attempted property fraud should you wish to contest any of this. You can't prove anything, Margaret snapped, but Robert's quiet voice cut through her bluster. Enough, Margaret. He placed the folder of emails on the table with finality. It's over. Sarah dissolved into sobs, real ones this time. My followers are calling me a fraud. My sponsorships are pulling out. "Mom, fix this." But Margaret was staring at the emails, her face pale and drawn. "Robert, how could you?" "How could I?" he replied, his voice trembling with years of suppressed frustration. "How could you? You jeopardized our son's marriage, our grandchild's future, because you couldn't bear to give up control." Daniel finally spoke, his voice hoarse and broken. "Emily, I am so sorry. I should have stood up to them. I should have protected you, our home, our marriage." I looked at him, really looked at him. "Yes, you should have. We can fix this," he pleaded. "Move back home, start over." But my lawyer cut in smoothly. "The house will be returned to Emily's sole ownership, and given the circumstances, she's filing for divorce." The room erupted in protests, but I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. "Daniel," I said calmly, "you didn't just fail to protect me. You helped them hurt me. That's not something we can come back from." 6 months later, I stood in my fully restored home, finally feeling like it was truly mine again. The walls were painted in colors I loved, my grandmother's furniture was back in place, and the house felt warm and inviting, no longer tainted by their schemes. Sarah had moved out of state, her social media empire in ruins. Margaret and Robert were in marriage counseling after Robert finally found the courage to stand up to her. The illegal duplex had been renovated and turned into affordable housing through a local charity. As for Daniel, he'd sent me a letter last week. He was in therapy, finally confronting the toxic dynamics of his family. A small part of me hoped he'd find happiness, but not with me. I learned my worth, and it was far too high to ever settle for less again. The doorbell rang. Helen stood there, holding a casserole dish and grinning. "Ready for your housewarming party?" she asked, pulling me into a hug. I glanced around at the home I had fought so hard to reclaim. "You know what?" I said, smiling. "I am." Sometimes losing everything teaches you exactly what you're capable of. Margaret thought she could erase me, Sarah thought she could replace me, and Daniel thought he could choose them over me. They all learned the hard way what happens when you underestimate someone's strength. Now let me ask you, have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to control your life? How did you find the strength to fight back? Share your story in the comments below.